The void of space was calm, cold, and endless, until a sudden ripple tore open the silence. The human exploration ship Odyssey stumbled out of a wormhole, her silver hull glowing faintly against the stars. Inside, the crew was shaken but alive. Captain Ethan Cole stood at the command chair, gripping the railing as the instrument screamed with errors. They had not planned to enter a wormhole. It had dragged them in like a hungry mouth, and now they were lost in an unknown corner of the galaxy. No one had time to wonder where they were because sensors lit up instantly. Dozens of signals filled the radar, then hundreds. The bridge fell silent as the crew realized they had jumped into the center of someone else's empire. Sleek alien warships glided from the darkness, each one larger than the Odyssey, bristling with weapons. Their hulls glowed with golden symbols, sharp wings curving like blades. These were not explorers, these were hunters. A voice crackled over comms, cold and commanding. It was translated automatically, but the tone needed no translation. Unidentified vessel, you have entered Imperial. Space, power down engines, lower shields, and prepare to kneel before the Emperor. The words struck the crew like a knife. Kneel? Ethan Cole's jaw tightened. He had been a soldier before becoming an explorer, and he knew what kneeling meant in a galaxy ruled by conquerors. The crew waited for his order, fear and defiance in their eyes. Lieutenant Mara whispered, "Captain, they're surrounding us." The radar showed the truth. Alien ships forming a perfect circle, weapons aimed at the small Terran vessel. Escape seemed impossible. The alien commander spoke again. "Barbarians, you stand before the might of the Eternal Empire. Submit, and you may be spared. Resist, and your ashes will drift among the stars." Ethan pressed the comm switch. His voice was steady, firm, almost calm. "This is Captain Ethan Cole of the Terran ship Odyssey. We are explorers, not slaves, and we kneel to no one." The crew felt the weight of his words. Some held their breath, others smiled faintly despite the danger. Humanity had spoken its first words to the galaxy, and they were not words of fear. The aliens did not take the defiance lightly. The fleet tightened its circle, beams of red light scanning across the Odyssey's hull. The humans watched as power signatures spiked, weapons charging. The moment stretched into silence. A single spark could ignite war, and the galaxy would remember the choice made here. Inside the ship, tension burned through every corridor. Engineers whispered about overloading reactors to fight back. Gunners checked railguns even though they looked useless against massive enemy cruisers. The youngest crew members stared at the stars, wondering if this would be the last sky they ever saw. Ethan stood tall, eyes fixed on the alien ships outside. He remembered Earth. Blue oceans, green forests, children running through cities. If he surrendered now, humanity would begin its life in the galaxy on its knees. That was not the way of Terrans. Humans had always stood, even against stronger foes. That spirit was carved into their bones. The alien commander returned with mocking laughter. "Your defiance is meaningless. You are one ship against an empire of 10,000 fleets. You will kneel." His words echoed across the bridge, but this time the crew of the Odyssey did not flinch. They were afraid, but their fear was mixed with fire. Without warning, a lance of light fired from an alien cruiser, slamming into the Odyssey's shields. The ship shook violently. Alarms howled. The shields barely held. Sparks rained across the control panels. "Shields at 40%. Mara shouted. Ethan's face hardened. "Return fire." Railguns spun and thundered, hurling metal slugs into the void. The first round hit an alien frigate, tearing chunks of glowing metal from its hull. The alien staggered back, surprised that such a small ship dared to fight. More beams of light struck the Odyssey. The crew strapped into their seats, holding on as the ship rocked. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but not broken. Each time they fired back, alien ships reeled under the sheer force of kinetic weapons. Humanity had no elegant plasma or shimmering beams. They had steel and fury, and in that moment it was enough to shock the Empire. "Captain, more signatures incoming," Mara cried. Ethan looked at the radar. His stomach twisted. A massive battleship emerged from the darkness, dwarfing the rest. Its cannons glowed like suns. A voice filled the comms again. "This is your final chance, humans, kneel." The crew looked at Ethan. Sweat rolled down his face, but his eyes burned. He stood straight, every muscle tense, and spoke into the calm with quiet strength. "We will stand." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a species. The alien battleship fired. A beam of searing energy crossed the void, crashing. Against the Odyssey's shields, metal groaned, panels cracked, the ship screamed in pain. But the humans still stood, railguns spitting fire. Defiance burned brighter than fear. Somewhere deep inside the ship, an engineer whispered to himself, "If this is the end, let the galaxy know Terrans never kneel." And as the battle raged, the human ship refused to bow, surrounded by a sea of enemies, holding the line not just for survival, but for the honor of Earth. That was the moment the Galactic Empire learned a dangerous truth. Humanity had stumbled into their domain, but they would not kneel. They would fight, and the stars themselves would remember their defiance. The first clash had ended with smoke and sparks across the Odyssey's bridge, but somehow, the small Terran ship still floated, bruised but alive. The alien fleet had pulled back slightly, their commanders confused. That one fragile vessel dared to resist, the humans were breathing hard, battered but unbroken. Around them, the stars glimmered cold and distant as if waiting for history to be written. Captain Ethan Cole wiped blood from his forehead. The crew was exhausted, but their eyes still held fire. They had stood against an empire and had not bent, he knew. However, that the empire would not let this insult pass. A single warning shot had turned into a test, and the humans had answered with defiance. That was not something the galaxy would forgive easily. The comm crackled again. This time it was no patrol officer, but a higher voice, deep and sharp like steel. "Humans of Earth, you have entered forbidden space and attacked vessels of the Eternal Empire. You will submit immediately or be destroyed. We give you this one chance." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. "We are explorers. We came here by accident, but hear me well. We are not slaves. We kneel to no one." His words echoed again. Across the bridge, the crew knew it was reckless, but also right. To kneel here meant every human world would kneel tomorrow. Better to die standing than live bent. The alien voice hissed with fury. "You call yourselves explorers, yet you carry weapons that spit iron and death. Very well. If you will not kneel, then you will burn." A signal pulsed, and dozens of alien ships lit up, their cannons charging. The void was about to turn red. The crew tensed, hands hovering over weapons and controls. But before the aliens could fire, the Odyssey's sensors screamed again. More ships were arriving, human ships, sleek but powerful. 3 Terran war cruisers burst from a wormhole behind the Odyssey, engines blazing. Their dark hulls gleamed with fresh steel, the first wave of Earth's reinforcements. The bridge erupted with relief. Mara gasped. "It's the Resolute, the Horizon, and the Valiant." They had not come alone after all. Humanity had heard their distress call. The alien fleet hesitated. For centuries they had fought countless enemies, but never had another species arrive so boldly. To see humans call for help and receive it so quickly shook them. The newcomers did not kneel either. Instead they moved into formation, protecting the battered Odyssey. The lead Terran ship hailed the alien commander. "This is Commander Adrian Ross of the Terran Navy. You will disengage immediately or face consequences." His voice was deep, calm but carried the weight of command. The aliens laughed, the sound echoed across comms like knives. 3 more ships against an empire of thousands? You truly are barbarians. Then the battle began. The alien cruisers fired beams of searing energy, slicing toward the human ships. But the Terran war cruisers responded with a roar. Railguns and missile pods spat fury into the void. A storm of steel and fire tore across the battlefield. The first alien ship exploded into fragments, shocking its allies. The humans did not use elegant weapons, but their brutal kinetic firepower smashed through shields as if they were glass. The void filled with chaos. Human ships darted between enemy lines, smaller but faster. Their tactics were unpredictable. Alien captains cursed as the Terrans fought like wolves, striking hard, then vanishing into the dark. The Odyssey, though damaged, joined the fight, railguns hammering one more enemy frigate into silence. "Captain, look at them," Mara cried, pointing at the screen. "They don't know how to fight us." She was right. The Empire's fleets were used to enemies who obeyed the rules of war, who knelt when ordered, but humanity fought differently. Like survival itself was fuel. Like every shot was a promise that they would not bow. The alien commander howled, "Enough! Crush them!" But already his fleet was staggering. For every beam they fired, the humans answered with twice the fury. The battle raged near the Vega outpost, a massive Imperial station glowing in the distance. The humans saw it, a symbol of dominance bristling with guns towering over the system like a throne. Ethan realized the truth. This fight was not just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message. "Target the station," he ordered. The Terran cruisers shifted, focusing fire on the Vega outpost. A rain of missiles and kinetic rounds slammed into its shields. Sparks of light erupted across its massive hull. Alarms wailed inside the alien fortress as cracks spread through its armor. The alien fleet panicked. They had never expected newcomers to attack an outpost directly, and yet the Terrans did not hesitate. They tore through defenses, breaking centuries of unchallenged rule. One final volley from the Resolute's rail cannon thundered across the void. The station cracked open, flames spilling into space. Vega, outpost once untouchable, was falling. The silence that followed was deafening. The Empire's fleet pulled back, not in retreat, but in shock. They had underestimated these humans, and it had cost them dearly. The galaxy would hear of this. The barbarians from Earth had destroyed an Imperial outpost. Ethan stood at the bridge, his chest rising with heavy breaths. His ship was battered, but his spirit was not. Around him, the crew sat in stunned silence. The first true battle had ended, and humanity had not just survived. They had shaken the largest empire in the galaxy, the comm crackled one last time, a furious voice screaming across the void. "Terrans, you have sealed your fate. The Emperor will hear of this, and when he does, your world will burn." Then the signal cut. The stars returned to silence. The humans knew what would come. Retribution, war, fire like they had never seen, but for now they had stood tall. They had refused to kneel, and the galaxy had witnessed it. That was the moment when humanity stopped being unknown wanderers and became the spark that would set an empire on fire. The wreckage of the Vega outpost still glowed behind them, shattered metal drifting in the void like broken teeth. For centuries, the outpost had stood as an unshakable symbol of Imperial control. Now it was silent, dead, its remains a scar across the stars. For the Terrans, it was victory, but for the Empire, it was humiliation. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the Odyssey's bridge, the ship patched with emergency repairs. His crew moved, quickly, trying to stabilize systems, but everyone knew the truth. They had crossed a line. There was no turning back now. The destruction of Vega would echo across the galaxy like a war horn. The Terran cruisers, Resolute, Horizon, and Valiant, formed a tight formation around the damaged Odyssey. Commander Adrian Ross's face appeared on the main screen. His expression was grim. "Captain Cole, we did the impossible tonight, but make no mistake. This was only the first wave. The Empire will not forgive this. They will send a fleet, not just patrols. The question is, do we run or stand?" Ethan met his gaze with calm fire. "If we run, they'll find Earth. If we stand, we show them humanity doesn't break." His words carried weight. The crew felt it. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was about pride, about freedom. Humanity's first steps into the galaxy would not be taken on bent knees. Before they could plan further, alarms screamed. Sensors picked up new contacts, hundreds of them. Imperial reinforcements were dropping out of warp, their hulls burning with golden light, each ship larger, deadlier. Thousands of fighters spilled out like swarms of locusts, the sky filled with death. "By the stars," Mara whispered, staring at the endless red dots filling the radar. "That's not a fleet, that's an armada." The crew froze. The aliens hadn't come to fight a battle. They had come to make an example. The message was clear. No one defies the Empire and survives. Ethan clenched his fists, His voice was steel. "Then let's give them a reason to remember us." Orders rang out. Engines roared, guns locked. The Terrans moved as one. The battle erupted like thunder. The void became a storm of beams and explosions. The alien armada fired endless waves of plasma, lighting the darkness with burning rivers of light. Terran railguns roared back, sending iron slugs punching through shields. The missiles screamed, cutting through space before blooming into fire. The clash of technology was brutal. Plasma. Elegance against raw kinetic fury. The Resolute dove through the enemy line, rail cannons shredding a destroyer in half. The Horizon unleashed a storm of missiles that tore apart a squadron of fighters. The Valiant burned with fire as her armor cracked, but she rammed an alien cruiser, splitting it open in a suicidal charge. The humans fought like cornered wolves, vicious, unpredictable, fearless. On the Odyssey, sparks flew as panels overloaded. Mara shouted, "Shields down to 20%. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Divert power to weapons. If we die, we take as many of them with us as we can." The bridge shook violently as another beam cut across the hull. But even then, the crew did not bow. They screamed in defiance, their hands flying over controls, spitting death into the endless dark. The aliens expected submission, panic, begging. Instead, they faced madness. Humans laughed as they fired, cursed as they bled, fought as if death meant nothing. The alien commanders could not understand it. For centuries, the Empire had ruled by fear. But here was a species that answered fear with fury. The battle raged for what felt like hours. The Terrans outnumbered 100-1, but their tactics were wild, desperate. They struck where the enemy was weak, then vanished. They turned wrecks of destroyed ships into cover, firing from shadows. Every move screamed one truth. Humans were not prey, they were predators. Then it happened. The Resolute unleashed a final, desperate shot, her massive rail cannon overheating as it fired a slug the size of a house. It struck the Vega Station's ruined core, still faintly powered. The explosion that followed was catastrophic. A chain reaction tore through the battlefield. Shockwaves of fire and debris ripped across the void. Alien ships scattered, hundreds destroyed in an instant. The Terrans too were thrown into chaos, alarms howling as their hulls rattled under the shock. But when the fire cleared, silence followed. The mighty Imperial fleet was gone, broken into fragments. Their perfect formation scattered, their pride in ruins. On the bridge of the Odyssey, the crew stared at the aftermath in disbelief. They were alive. The impossible had happened. Ethan exhaled slowly, his voice low. "We just destroyed an armada." His words hung heavy in the air. Humanity had done what no other species had, dared. They had defied the Empire and survived, but victory carried a shadow. Across the galaxy, eyes turned toward the Terrans. News of Vega's fall spread like wildfire. To the oppressed worlds under Imperial rule, the humans became a symbol of hope. To the rulers of the Empire, they became a threat that must be erased. Ethan looked at the stars. His heart pounded with both pride and dread. He knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would come again, in numbers greater than the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity was no longer hidden. They had been noticed, and the galaxy would never forget the day the Terrans refused to kneel. The galaxy trembled as the news spread. Vega Outpost had fallen, and with it the myth of Imperial invincibility. Across 1,000 systems, whispers filled the streets and taverns. Some laughed in secret, others prayed in fear. For the first time in centuries, the Eternal Empire had been wounded, and the wound had been dealt by newcomers, humans, on Earth. The people gathered in front of giant screens as the images came through. They saw battered Terran warships limping home, scarred but victorious. Families wept and cheered at the same time. Humanity had taken its first steps into the wider galaxy, and already it had shaken giants. Yet celebration was short-lived, because every leader on Earth knew what would follow. The Empire would answer. In the Imperial capital, a world of silver towers and endless palaces, the Emperor himself stood before the Council of Stars. His robes shimmered with gold, his crown burned with light, his eyes burned hotter still. For centuries he had ruled unchallenged, Now some primitive species from a backwater planet had dared to defy him. His voice thundered across the chamber. Terrans must be crushed. They must serve as a warning to all who dream of rebellion, for if they are not broken, the galaxy itself will fracture. The Emperor's command was simple. Every fleet not bound in war was to move towards Sol. Earth would be burned until nothing remained but ash. The order spread through military networks. Thousands of admirals saluted. Thousands of ships began to move. The largest mobilization in living memory had begun. Back on the Odyssey, Captain Ethan Cole sat in silence, staring at the stars. He knew the weight of what had happened. He had not only brought humanity into the galaxy, he had brought the Empire's wrath down upon them. Commander Adrian Ross appeared on the screen, his face hard. "We have intercepted transmissions, Captain. The Emperor himself has declared war on Earth. They mean to make an example of us." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we will answer him. Not with fear, but with fire." The crew stiffened at his words. Some felt pride, others fear, but all understood. This was no longer a skirmish. This was survival. The Empire did not waste time. Within days, their ultimatum arrived. The message was transmitted on every frequency, not just to humans, but to every world under the Empire's gaze. A massive hologram of the Emperor appeared in the skies above Earth's cities. His voice rolled like thunder. "Humans, you have destroyed my fleet. You have dared to touch my outpost. You have mocked my rule. I offer you one chance, kneel. Swear eternal obedience to the eternal Empire. Deliver your fleets, your weapons, and your worlds into my hand. Do this, and I may allow your people to live. Refuse, and I will scour your planet until it is dust. You will kneel, or you will burn." The people of Earth froze. The air seemed to shiver with fear. The Emperor's image hung over oceans, deserts, and cities. His words a blade of terror pressed against humanity's throat. In hidden rooms, leaders debated furiously. Some argued for surrender. "We cannot fight an empire that spans galaxies." Others pounded fists on the table. Better to die free than live chained. The final answer came not from politicians, but from soldiers. The Terran Navy gathered, in Sol orbit, their battered ships standing tall against the backdrop of Earth. Every captain sent one message back through the comms, simple but unyielding. "We kneel to no one." The Emperor's rage shook the halls of his palace. He smashed his staff upon the floor. His admirals bowed low, promising to drown humanity in fire. The order was given. The Imperial fleet was coming. Billions of tons of warships, engines burning like suns, marching toward Earth. But humanity had a secret. Deep beneath the oceans and hidden in shipyards carved into asteroids, a project had been waiting. Not just ships, but monsters of steel. Terran dreadnoughts, experimental, massive, bristling with rail cannons the size of mountains. They had never been revealed, for humanity had hoped never to need them. But now, as the Emperor's armada set course for Sol, the secret would rise in dry dock. The first dreadnought came alive. Its hull plated with experimental alloys black as midnight. Its engines roared like thunder. The name painted across its side was simple, but heavy with meaning. Indomitable on the Odyssey. Mara watched the news feeds in awe. "They'll know now," she whispered. "They'll know humanity doesn't kneel." Ethan stood tall, his face lit by the glow of the stars. "The Emperor gave us a choice, kneel or burn. We've made ours. Now it's time to show him what Terrans truly are." The galaxy held its breath. The ultimatum had been answered. Humanity would not kneel. Now war was coming. A storm of fire and steel would decide the fate of Earth and the galaxy itself. The Emperor's ultimatum had been delivered and rejected. The galaxy whispered in fear and awe. Never before had any world refused the Emperor's command and lived past a season. Yet here were humans, loud and defiant, daring to stand tall in the face of billions of Imperial soldiers. Across the stars, slaves and subjects spoke the words in secret taverns and dark alleys. "We kneel to no one." The spark of rebellion was spreading, but sparks only lived if they found fire. On Earth, the fire was being forged. Shipyards hidden in asteroid belts roared to life. Entire oceans boiled with secret factories rising from beneath the waves. Humanity had prepared, not fully, not perfectly, but enough to survive. The Terran High Command unveiled their greatest secret, the Dreadnought Project. The Indomitable was the first to rise, a mountain of steel and shadow, longer than cities. Her hull was coated in dark matter armor that shimmered like liquid night. Rail cannons stretched along her sides, weapons so massive they could hurl slugs the size of skyscrapers across space. At her heart beat the Nova Core, an engine unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Mara, standing on the observation deck of the Odyssey, whispered as the dreadnought drifted free from dock. "She's beautiful and terrifying, but the Indomitable was not alone. Behind her came the Eternal Dawn, the Wrath of Terra and the Iron Will, 4 dreadnoughts, each unique, each born from sacrifice. Thousands of engineers had given their lives in accidents. Thousands more had worked in secret for decades, and now their children would see the fruits of that toil. Humanity had built not just ships, but legends. Captain Ethan Cole was invited aboard the Indomitable for her maiden command ceremony. He walked through halls wide enough to hold a destroyer. Soldiers saluted as he passed, their faces young but determined. In the command chamber, Admiral Elena Drake stood waiting. Her voice was calm but burned with conviction. "Captain Cole, you were the first to defy the Empire in open space. Today, you stand aboard the blade that will cut their pride." Ethan looked through the massive viewports at the galaxy beyond, his jaw clenched. "The Emperor believes he will burn Earth. Let him come. We will show him fire of our own." Training began immediately. The crews drilled endlessly, running. Simulations of battles against impossible odds. The dreadnoughts practiced maneuvers no ship their size should have been able to perform. Terran engineers had designed them with flexibility unknown to Imperial doctrine. While Imperial ships relied on numbers and intimidation, Terran dreadnoughts were built with the soul of predators. Each one could fight like a fleet. Each one carried weapons designed to tear apart the shields the Empire had trusted for centuries. The galaxy laughed at first. Alien spies reported the dreadnoughts as primitive giants, hulks of steel that looked crude compared to the Empire's sleek golden fleets. But laughter died quickly when the first field test was leaked. A captured asteroid, the size of a small moon, was hurled into the void. The Indomitable fired a single round and the asteroid shattered into dust. The shockwave was felt across nearby systems. The news spread like wildfire. In backwater colonies, enslaved miners cheered, whispering that the barbarians from Earth had teeth sharp enough to bite the Empire. In the Emperor's palace, however, silence ruled. His admirals stood in tense silence as reports came in. The humans had dreadnoughts, weapons even the Empire had never built. The Emperor's eyes narrowed and his voice was soft but venomous. "Then I will burn them with all the fires of the stars." The Terran Navy gathered in orbit of Mars, a fleet like humanity had never seen before. Hundreds of ships lined up. But the centerpieces were the dreadnoughts, towering like titans among wolves. Civilians filled the skies with their eyes, cameras broadcasting the sight to Earth and beyond. For the first time in history, humanity stood united, not as nations, but as Terrans. Children pointed at the ships with awe, old veterans saluted, and in every heart, the same truth burned. They would not kneel. Inside the Odyssey, Ethan stood with his crew watching the fleet prepare. Mara asked softly, "Do you think we can win?" Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on the dreadnoughts glowing in the light of the sun. "I don't know if we can win," he said, "but I know we cannot bow. That's enough." His words filled the crew with a quiet, fierce pride. Far away, Imperial scouts watched and fled back to their masters. The Terrans were no longer a nuisance, they were a threat. The Emperor's armada was already moving, thousands of ships crossing the void like a tide of steel and gold. The galaxy held its breath. The greatest war in living memory was about to begin. But in that moment, as the dreadnoughts ignited their engines, humanity felt no fear. The sky itself seemed to whisper their vow. We kneel to none. The stars over Orion Gate burned like cold diamonds, silent and endless. But every Terran crew member felt the storm approaching. Orion Gate was no ordinary place. It was a massive wormhole nexus, a doorway between empires. Whoever held it controlled the roads of the galaxy. And tonight, it would become the battlefield that decided whether Earth lived or burned. The Terran fleet waited in the shadows near the gate. 4 dreadnoughts led the line, their black hulls glowing faintly in the starlight. Indomitable, Eternal Dawn, Wrath of Terra, Iron Will. Each of them bristled with rail cannons, missile bays, and experimental nova weapons that hummed with restrained fury. Behind them, hundreds of smaller ships held formation. Battered cruisers and frigates ready to fight until the end. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the Odyssey's bridge, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Thousands of red dots were moving closer. The Imperial Armada, endless and merciless. He felt his chest tighten, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Today we are the wall between Earth and annihilation. Hold that line. The crew nodded, fear and pride mixing in their eyes. Mara whispered, "There's so many, Captain." Ethan's gaze hardened. "Then we'll show them how Terrans fight." Moments later, the void tore open. Imperial ships burst through the wormhole in perfect formation. Golden cruisers, sleek battleships, carriers spilling fighters like swarms of hornets. The enemy fleet stretched for miles, a wall of firepower unmatched by anything in known space. At the center loomed 3 Imperial supercarriers, their cannons glowing like newborn stars. A booming voice filled the comms, the Empire's Grand Admiral himself. "Terrans, the Emperor's will is absolute. Kneel now and your deaths will be swift. Resist and your species will vanish into ash." Ethan leaned toward the mic, his tone sharp as steel. "We kneel to none." His words echoed across every Terran ship. The crews erupted in cheers, fists slammed against consoles. Even as death closed in, defiance burned hotter than fear. The battle began with a flash that lit the darkness. Imperial carriers launched wave after wave of fighters, sleek machines. Darting through the void, plasma beams carved toward the Terran line, cutting through space like rivers of fire. But then the dreadnoughts answered. The Indomitable's main rail cannon roared. A slug the size of a building ripped through the void and smashed into an Imperial cruiser. The ship split apart instantly, its golden armor shredded like paper. The Wrath of Terra unleashed a storm of missiles, each one screaming toward its target. Alien ships exploded in blossoms of fire, pieces of their fleets scattering like burning leaves, yet the Armada pressed on. A wall of plasma struck the Eternal Dawn, tearing chunks from its armor. Sparks rained across her decks. Alarms screamed, but the dreadnought held steady, returning fire with her nova lances. Beams of condensed energy that melted shields like wax. An Imperial battleship was gutted in seconds, its core bursting in a wave of light. On the Odyssey, Mara shouted, "They're trying to flank us on the right." Ethan barked orders. Terran frigates peeled away, intercepting enemy fighters in a storm of railgun fire. One frigate went down, burning as it plunged into the wormhole's edge. But the line held. The humans fought like wolves guarding their den, relentless and cunning. The Empire had numbers, but the Terrans had spirit. Each time an Imperial ship pressed forward, human crews fought with reckless bravery, turning wreckage into cover, luring enemy destroyers into ambushes. The Iron Will charged straight into the thick of the fleet, her captain ramming an Imperial carrier broadside, tearing it apart before unleashing point-blank rail cannon fire into the swarm. The ship's hull screamed under the pressure, but the crew roared louder, refusing to break. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The void was filled with burning wreckage, twisted metal drifting like corpses in the sea. Still the fight raged. Still the Empire pressed forward. But for every dozen ships they threw at the line, the Terrans took them down. Then the Grand Admiral's flagship appeared, a leviathan of gold bristling with guns, its cannons fired in a blinding wave. The Wrath of Terra staggered, her armor buckling. Mara gasped, "They're going to tear us apart." But Admiral Drake's voice cut across comms, fierce and unshaken. "Then we tear them first." The Indomitable and Eternal Dawn swung in formation, both dreadnoughts aligning their main guns. Ethan held his breath as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The rail cannons fired together, twin slugs screaming across the void. They slammed into the Grand Admiral's flagship, Smashing through its shields, the golden Leviathan shuddered, armor splitting open. Then the wrath of Terra, bleeding fire but still alive, unleashed her Nova Core. A beam of white fire erupted from her bow, cutting straight through the flagship's heart. Silence followed. The Grand Admiral's ship tore apart in slow motion, breaking into shards of burning light. The Empire's command was gone. The Armada faltered, their formation breaking. Terran, crews cheered, tears streaming down their faces, but Ethan did not smile. He stared at the wreckage, knowing this was only a beginning. "This isn't victory," he said quietly. "This is survival. The Emperor will not stop. He will send more. He will come himself if he must." But for that one moment, at Orion Gate, humanity had done the impossible. They had faced an armada and shattered its pride. The galaxy had witnessed wolves standing against lions and refusing to kneel. The wreckage of the Grand Admiral's flagship still drifted among the stars, glowing like dying embers against the black. For centuries, the Imperial Armada had marched, undefeated, their golden fleets crushing all who resisted. But at Orion Gate they had been broken, not by an empire, not by an ancient rival, but by newcomers, humans who had stumbled into the galaxy and refused to kneel. The news spread faster than the flames of battle. Across 1,000 systems, slaves whispered in the dark, miners paused in their tunnels, and merchants traded rumors, with trembling hands. The Terrans stood. The Terrans killed an armada. The Terrans destroyed the Grand Admiral. Those words lit fires in the hearts of the oppressed, and in the halls of the imperial capital, they poured poison into the Emperor's pride. On Earth, the celebration was thunderous. Families danced in the streets. Screens replayed the battle again and again, showing the moment the flagship exploded into shards of light. Children pointed at the dreadnoughts with awe. Soldiers embraced one another, their uniforms stained with oil and blood. For the first time in history, humanity felt not just united but unstoppable. They had faced death itself and returned with victory. But inside the command chambers of the Terran Navy, the mood was not celebration. Admiral Elena Drake stood before a map of the galaxy, her face carved from iron. "We hurt them," she said, her voice low. "But the Empire is not dead. They will return with greater fury. If we wait, they will bring their full might to Sol. If we move, we can turn their weakness into chaos." Her words settled heavily over the officers. Captain Ethan Cole, standing at the back of the chamber, spoke with quiet fire. "The Empire believes fear is eternal. If we strike now, if we push into their space, we show the galaxy that they can bleed. And when others see that, they'll rise too." The room fell silent. Every officer knew the truth. The battle at Orion Gate had not been the end. It was the beginning of a war that would reshape the stars. The Terran fleet did not rest. Instead, it gathered strength and moved forward, not back. The dreadnoughts led the charge, slipping through the wounded lines of the Empire. For the first time in centuries, Imperial systems saw an enemy fleet emerge from the void, and not just any fleet. Terrans, the barbarians who refused to bow. The attacks came swift and merciless. Shipyards once thought untouchable erupted in flames. Terran missiles turned golden stations into drifting graves. Mining worlds liberated themselves overnight when Terran ships entered orbit. Entire garrisons surrendered rather than face the wrath of the dreadnoughts. In the shadows, rebellions exploded. Planets long crushed under Imperial boots lit their skies with fire. The galaxy began to shake, not from destruction alone, but from the impossible idea that the Empire could be defied. In marketplaces and on starliners, in jungles and deserts, people whispered, "The Terrans do not kneel, and neither should we." The Emperor's iron grip was slipping, one finger at a time, but the Empire did not sleep. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor stood before a council of trembling admirals. His voice was not a roar, but a whisper, colder than the void. "They think themselves wolves, but wolves are hunted. If the galaxy believes in them, then I will break not only their ships but their very spirit. Burn their colonies, enslave their children, let them watch their dream collapse into ash." His eyes burned with a fury no star could match. Humanity had not just challenged him. They had insulted his throne and that he could never forgive. Back aboard the Odyssey, Ethan walked the silent corridors. Crew members slept in corners, exhausted from endless battles. He stopped by a viewport and stared at the streaking stars. Mara joined him quietly, her voice soft. "We've changed something, haven't we?" Ethan nodded slowly. "We were explorers once. Now we're something else. We're a question the galaxy never asked itself. What if someone said no? What if someone refused to kneel?" The fleet pressed deeper. Every victory brought more enemies, but also more allies. Small alien fleets joined their ranks. Ragged rebels who had fought alone for centuries now flew beside Terran dreadnoughts. Their ships were weak, but their hope was strong, and hope was more dangerous to the Empire than any weapon. Then came the moment that turned whispers into a storm. At Calros Prime, the Empire's most fortified colony, the Terrans launched an assault. The battle raged for hours, golden towers burning under rail cannon fire. But when the smoke cleared, the Imperial banners fell, and the people of Calros, beaten and enslaved for generations, raised the Terran flag. They chanted a single phrase across the plazas, a phrase that traveled through comms and across systems. "We kneel to none." The galaxy shuddered. The Emperor's throne trembled. For the first time in living memory, his empire was not feared but mocked, not worshipped but resisted. The day the Terrans shattered Calros Prime, the day they struck fear into the heart of the Eternal Empire, became known as the day the Empire shook. And far above, in the dark halls of his palace, the Emperor swore an oath of his own. If humanity would not kneel, then humanity would burn. His armada was gathering. His wrath was coming. The final storm had only just begun. The galaxy held its breath. Every star, every world, every drifting ship knew the storm was coming. Whispers of rebellion had spread like fire after Orion Gate and Calros Prime, but whispers were not enough to topple an empire that had ruled for millennia, and the Emperor had grown silent. A silence so heavy that it crushed hope and bred fear, until the day the sky itself trembled. The Eternal Armada rose, not in pieces, not in scattered fleets, but as a single tide of gold, from 1,000 shipyards, from hidden forges beneath suns, from the dark vaults of conquered worlds they came, the largest gathering of warships the galaxy had ever seen. Their numbers blotted out the stars. Their banners glowed with fire. At their head stood the Emperor's personal flagship, a vessel larger than cities, plated in gold so bright it reflected light across the void like a second sun. The Emperor himself had come, no longer content to send admirals, no longer content to watch from his throne. He would burn humanity with his own hand, and his message was broadcast across the galaxy, his voice cold and merciless. "Terrans, you have mocked the eternal throne. You have infected the weak with dreams of rebellion. No more today. Your species ends. Today Earth burns. You will kneel in death, if not in life." On Earth, the people froze as his image filled the skies again. But unlike before, they no longer trembled in silence. In the streets they raised their fists. On the colonies they sang songs of defiance, and aboard the Terran fleet, soldiers whispered the same vow that had carried them this far. "We kneel to none." The Terran navy assembled, near Jupiter, the dreadnoughts towering at the front. Their black hulls glowed faintly, scars from countless battles crisscrossing their armor. Indomitable, eternal dawn, wrath of Terra, iron will. These titans carried not only weapons, but the will of an entire species. Behind them stretched every ship humanity could muster. Frigates, cruisers, carriers, even refitted cargo haulers with guns welded to their sides. It was not an armada, not compared to the Empire, but it was everything Earth had. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the Odyssey's bridge. His crew moved with quiet efficiency. No panic, no despair. They had fought too many battles to fear one more. Mara leaned close, her voice firm, though her hands trembled. "Captain, if we fail here, Earth dies." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "Then we do not fail." The void lit up as the Imperial Armada arrived. Gold met black, suns met shadows. The Emperor's fleet stretched farther than sensors could measure. The Terrans looked like ants standing before a storm, yet no one wavered. The Emperor's Voice cut through the void one last time. Last chance, Terrans, bow before me. Ethan pressed the comm. His voice rang across every Terran ship and through the intercepts across the galaxy itself. We kneeled to none. The dreadnoughts shifted into firing formation. The last war of mankind had begun. The first volley shook the heavens. Imperial cannons fired rivers of plasma cutting through the dark. Dozens of Terran ships burned in the opening strike. But the dreadnoughts roared back. The Indomitables' main rail cannon fired, its slug tearing through an Imperial battleship like paper. The Eternal Dawn unleashed her Nova Lance, a beam of white fire that split an enemy cruiser in two. The Wrath of Terra and Iron Will launched missile storms so dense they turned space into a forest of fire. The Empire's numbers pressed hard. Hundreds of Terran ships were shattered in the first hours, yet still the line held. The humans fought, with madness and brilliance, turning debris into weapons, turning wreckage into cover. Fighters rammed carriers, frigates sacrificed themselves to shield dreadnoughts. Every move screamed the same vow, death before kneeling. Then the Emperor's flagship advanced, larger than any dreadnought. Its cannons unleashed a storm that shook the Terran line. The Wrath of Terra staggered, her armor splitting, explosions tearing across her decks. Ethan watched in horror as her lights flickered. Mara cried out, "They're tearing her apart." But still the ship fought, her last rail cannon firing into the golden flagship, defiant until her core ignited, and she vanished in a blossom of white flame. The loss cut through the fleet like a blade, but it also lit a fire. The Terrans screamed, across comms, voices raw with fury. "For Terra, for Earth, for Wrath of Terra." The dreadnought surged forward, closing the gap with the Emperor's ship. Admiral Elena Drake's voice filled the fleet, calm and ironclad. "The Emperor thinks himself eternal. Today we prove him mortal. All ships, focus fire on the flagship." The sky ignited. Thousands of Terran weapons locked onto one golden target. The Emperor's ship withstood the storm, its shields glowing brighter, its cannons cutting down Terran ships by the dozens. But the dreadnoughts pressed closer. The Indomitable rammed. Into its flank, rail cannons firing point blank. The Eternal Dawn unleashed her Nova Core in a final desperate blast, burning a hole through the golden armor. The Iron Will, her hull torn open, charged into the gap, smashing into the Emperor's ship like a spear. Ethan's voice broke across comms, every word carrying the weight of humanity. For every child who dreamed free, for every soul crushed by empires, for Earth itself burn. The final volley of missiles, slugs, and energy beams tore into the flagship's heart. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the Emperor's vessel exploded, a sun blooming in the void, light swallowing gold. The galaxy went silent. The Eternal Emperor was gone, his throne shattered, his fleet broken. Across 1,000 worlds, people cried out in disbelief. Slaves raised their chains and broke them. Rebels screamed in joy. The Empire had fallen on the Odyssey's bridge. Ethan stood covered in sweat and smoke. Mara whispered through tears, "Did we win?" Ethan stared at the fading light of the Emperor's ship. His voice was low, trembling with both grief and pride. "We did more than win. We changed the galaxy." And across the stars, from the smallest colony to the farthest world, a single vow echoed into history. A vow carried first by Terran lips and now by countless others. We kneel to none.